All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first webinar of 2022. We hope that you all had a wonderful holiday season and the year is kicked off strong and well, and that everyone's healthy and happy. Really grateful that you joined me here tonight. My name is Nick Adams, and I am one of the financial consultants on the team at John Graham and Associates. Before we get into tonight's webinar presentation, I do just want to point out that if you like what you see tonight, if you like the content that we put out on a regular basis and you'd like to find more content as we move into 2022, we've got a really aggressive content strategy and plan in place. So please check out our YouTube channel, which is Invest with JGA. You could find all of our previous videos there and continuous videos that we're going to put out throughout 2022 on our YouTube channel, Invest with JGA. And of course, you can always find us online at investwithjga.com for our website. So let's go ahead and get into tonight's presentation, retirement income planning. And this is a hot topic, as it should be, as we all move towards retirement. We want to make sure we have the right plan in place to achieve our goals. And that planning really starts what I call the runway, 3 to 5 years before your retirement date. We're on a runway. We want to have a plan in place. And it's critically important to have that plan because we want to have it in place the minute we hit retirement. Our plan can take off to what we've designed in the retirement plan that you've put in place. So let's go ahead and jump right in tonight. One of the key themes that you're going to hear about tonight is the fact that we need to be planning for a much longer retirement than we did 10 to 15 years ago. Okay. And the questions and thoughts that we need to be having are, will I be able to maintain my lifestyle as I reach retirement? Am I going to be able to meet all the expenses that we have? And we're going to talk a lot about that tonight. What should my investment allocation be? Maybe a hot question right now for some of you on the call tonight is, can I retire now or should I wait? What does that decision look like and what thoughts go into that? And then really coming back to, will my money last? Will it be there when I get to the end, or will I run out before? And that's a question, like I said, 10 or 15 years ago wasn't a hot topic, but now it is because we're living much longer, which I'm going to talk about here in just a few seconds. Moving on tonight. When we talk about retirement income, there has been a shift in that as over the last 10 or 15 years. And previously, a majority of our resources in retirement came from our pension and from Social Security. And as we've seen over the last 15 years, the number of pensions and the size of pensions have continued to go down. And really the reality of it is 15 to 20 years ago, the responsibility shifted. The employers realized they couldn't continue to carry the burden and fund pension programs. And that's really when 401ks kicked into place, and the transition of power and responsibility went from the employer taking care of your pension to us as individuals funding it. And as that has happened, the reality is that the sources of income that we see in retirement have shifted from guaranteed places like pensions and Social Securities, which today only makes up about 38% of our resources for retirement, and as 62% now have to come from our own investments, whether it's your 401ks, your Roth IRAs, real estate property, any other investments that you've done on your own that you've handled the risk and you've taken on the risk for. 62% of that will most likely be your responsibility in retirement as you move towards retirement, and understanding, hey, where's my income going to come from as I move into that next phase of life. And tonight we're going to dive into that. It's really 2 presentations put together, and don't be alarmed, that doesn't mean it's going to be hours long. We'll be efficient and respectful of your time tonight. But the first part of our presentation is going to really talk about the key factors and risks that we face going into retirement. So that'll be the first half. The second half talks about what is the planning that we should put in place up front that helps reduce those risk factors going into retirement. So we're going to cover those risk factors in detail. We're going to go over the benefits of creating a retirement income plan. We're going to talk about using available plan resources that we have here at John Graham and Associates. And we're going to talk about, hey, what should our next step be as we begin planning for our retirement? And we're on that runway, 3 to 5 years, kind of that retirement red zone before we lift off in the retirement, that next phase of life. So starting right away, we want to identify the key risk factors that you have going into retirement. Now, there's certainly more than 5, but we feel like The rest can all are subcategories of these main 5. So we don't need to go over the 20 or 30 or more that certain institutions list as risk factors in retirement. We can address most of those with 5. The first risk factor, something that's new today, longevity. You'll see in a slide coming up, we're all living longer. Our money has to last longer. The second risk factor, certainly something that's on everyone's mind, the ever rising cost of healthcare. How are we going to afford that? How much do we need to plan for? What's that going to be? The next factor is inflation. You know, CPI came out yesterday and it was 7% for the month of December. We're experiencing inflation right now that we haven't experienced in a long time. We'll see how long it lasts, but certainly there are steps you could do now to help combat that. We won't really focus on that tonight, but if you have questions about inflation and ways to hedge against it, please reach out to us. But we're going to talk about inflation and the impact that it can have on your retirement. And then the other risk, asset allocation. Where should my assets be as I move into retirement and when I'm into retirement? And what thoughts are there and strategies are there behind that? And then the fifth risk, and we really talk about running out of funds and resources in retirement, we talk about excess withdrawals. What's the right withdrawal rate? When over 60% of my income may need to come from my own assets, how do I put a safe withdrawal strategy in place that's going to help me combat that and ensure that I have assets at the end of my life? Starting with longevity, that number one risk that we list, we're all living longer. If you look at the bottom of the screen, a couple that's age 65 today, you have a 50% chance that one of you is going to live to be 93. And you have a 25% chance that one of you will live to be 98. Maybe it statistically would show the women have a longer chance of living longer, so it could be them, but we're all living longer. If we think back to when our parents and our grandparents, particularly our grandparents, retired, they would retire and their lifespan was 15 years. So they had to live in retirement for 15 years. What we're really talking about today, and it's a critical part of your retirement plan, is that we need to plan, and you need to plan for a 30-year retirement. We need to make sure our funds are in place if one of us were to live 30 years. And that's critical to make sure that's a part of your plan and you're funded that way. So the shift has happened. We're no longer living 15 years, we're living 20, 25, and there's a chance that one of you could see 30 years in retirement, which is a long, healthy life, hopefully that one that you can enjoy, but we want to make sure that we plan for it. The second risk is a big one, the cost of healthcare. Fidelity estimates right now that a 65-year-old couple will roughly need $295,000 to cover medical costs in retirement. Keep in mind, we're living longer, our healthcare costs last longer, right? So that's going to continue to go up and continue to rise. Obviously, inflation has an impact on that as well. The economy, inflation, all that tie together. So we have to plan for our healthcare costs. Where $295,000 is a really large number. So where do those funds go? How are they divided up? 19% they estimate will go towards prescription drug costs, those out-of-pocket costs that the insurance won't cover. 39% is going to go to expenses that are associated with Medicare Part B and other premiums associated with Medicare. So that's going to be a good chunk of those funds. And then 42% are going to go to Medicare cost sharing provisions, co-payments, co-insurance, deductibles, excluded benefits that you may have, things that just don't fall within the first two categories. Now, we're hopeful that there's a reset button pushed for overall healthcare costs, or we're hopeful that insurance, Medicare is updated and changed, but we can't plan on that. What we need to plan on is relying on ourselves and our strategies to continue to put us in a strong position as we move into retirement. One of the key points that's critical to point out here, and it's a whole nother seminar that we've done and we'll do in 2022, is in this $295,000 expense, not $1 of that is accounted towards long-term care. So if we're talking about needing at-home medical care, assisted living care, Alzheimer's care, memory care, just nursing home care, that is not broken out or accounted for in the $295,000. So it's important while you're planning for retirement to consider, what are my long-term care coverages? What do I want for my long-term care as I move into retirement? Some people are self-insured, meaning they could fund that themselves. Others have chosen, especially over the last 2 years, more and more people I meet with are really adamant they don't want to go into a nursing home, and I can understand that given what that industry has gone through over the last 2 years. And the flip side is you have some of those that just say, look, I don't want to have my family worry about taking care of me. I'm okay with going into that nursing home, and they look at a long-term care insurance plan that will help with those costs. And as I mentioned, we will certainly do educational pieces this year on long-term care from the John Graham and Associates team. So look for that if it's a hot topic for you, or reach out to us and we can give you a one-on-one presentation on it. The other buzzword right now, and something we're all experiencing, is inflation. And the reality of it is, even low inflation can really impact your purchasing power in retirement. And this slide really demonstrates low inflation numbers, 2, 3, or 4%. 2 to 3% inflation is pretty common. We haven't even experienced that. If we go back 2 or 3 years, inflation was 1%. The increases were little each year. So that's why today it feels more impactful, because we just simply haven't been through it in a long time. But this slide demonstrates if we had $50,000 today, with a 2% inflation in 25 years, that would really only be $30,477 in purchasing power. The same $50,000 would be down to $23,000 with a 3% inflation, and $18,756 with a 4% inflation. I can't stress this enough, and I don't want to take over the whole presentation tonight talking about inflation, but right now, we want to be having conversations with everyone about inflation and how you can hedge against it, and what's been historically the best hedge against inflation and things to do. So please, for our clients that are on the call tonight, we're certainly reaching out to you. If you're not a client and you want to have conversations about inflation and the impact it has on your overall portfolio right now, we want to talk about that. There are some changes that you could put in place potentially that will put you in a better situation for the inflation. And we know, is it going to continue? How fast is it going to continue to go up? It went from 6.7 for November to 7 in December. That compounded growth was actually a little bit smaller than the previous 2 months. So maybe we're seeing a slowdown already in inflation. It doesn't feel like that. I'm not sure if it feels like that to you guys or not, but we'll see how often the Feds raise the interest rate, and that's all done to help slow down inflation as we move into 2022. Perhaps one of the most critical components of your retirement strategy and your retirement plan as you position to move into retirement on that runway, and as you take off into retirement, is really your asset allocation. Where do I have funds stored at? Where do I have funds invested at throughout my retirement years? And as we talked about, the two components on the left side, inflation, maybe at 3%. The average rising cost of healthcare right now has been on a 5.4% a pace. So even in retirement, we have to hedge against those inflationary mechanisms. And we look at annual average portfolio returns. And the reality of it is, even in retirement, you have to keep a portion of your assets invested in the stock market and equities and places like that, because they outperform inflation. So if we look at a conservative portfolio, which is the first green column right here, that's really looking at a portfolio that's maybe 20% stocks, 50% bonds, and 30% short term. And the short term, when we think about short term, we're talking about funds that we may need in the next year or two, funds that are in CDs, which have zero return right now. I mean, the return is minimal, 1% or less, which is not what we're used to. We go back 20 years, you would talk about a 10, 15% return in CDs, or even in your own money market checking and savings. There's just no return right now. So when I talk about short term, that's where I'm talking about funds at. So that conservative portfolio can give you about a 5.94% of growth each year, and that's from 1926 to 2019. So pretty recent numbers for that statistic. In a balanced portfolio, somewhere where you're not quite as conservative, but you're not overly tilted towards a more aggressive stance, 50% stocks, 40% bonds, and 10% in short term. That for that time period, 1926 to 2019, would have returned around at 7.93%. So there we're talking about, okay, we're starting to outpace inflation numbers. We need that number in order to keep our assets growing in retirement. And then if you had a growth portfolio, which really looks more like 70% in stocks, 25% in bonds, and 5% in the short term, through that time period, it would have averaged around 8.94% return. Now our growth keeps ticking up, right? And then aggressive, aggressive in retirement and aggressive not in retirement. It's aggressive, 85% in stocks, 15% in bonds during that time period has returned 9.63%. Now, some of you might be saying, well, I thought as we moved into retirement, we don't really want to keep all of our funds invested at an aggressive level. And that's certainly true. And that would come into case on your individual plan of how much and when. At John Graham and Associates, we do a lot of bucket planning, meaning we have short-term funds, mid-range funds, long-term funds, right? So when we dig down in this and we show our clients, and for those of you on our phone that are on the meeting that are our clients, you might have seen it or in the process of seeing it. We still want to have a certain allocation set up to be in an aggressive portfolio. Our funds that we're not going to need in the next 3, 4, 5 years, we've got to have those growing. And the reason that we've got to have those growing is because of what they call the safe withdrawal rate. And many of you might have heard, oh, the safe withdrawal rate is 4%. And that's a number that was defined quite a while ago, and it still holds true to today. And this is everybody's individual portfolio might be a little bit different. So we're really putting out averages here. But if you could see, if you had on the left side of the screen, you had $500,000 and you retired in 1972, and you started taking a withdrawal strategy of 10%. During that time period, your funds would have run out in 1981. So 10%, obviously too high. And as we just continue to move over from that 10%, 9%, those funds would have lasted until 1982. 8%, those funds would have lasted until 1983. 7%, 85. 6%, we're inching up there, right? We're plus 10 years from our retirement date of 72 here, a little bit more than that. So 6% gets you to about 1989. Okay. Then we make a big jump. All right, what if I take out 5%? Okay, those funds last all the way to 97. Okay, just a few years past 20 years. But if you go back to what I talked about earlier, and it's a key component to retirement planning now, and that's the plan for 30 years. So in order to do that, our distribution, a safe distribution strategy is going to rely somewhere around 4%. And this graph really illustrates the impact of that. If you had taken out 4% every year, starting in 1972, off of your $500,000 in income, you see the graph here in that in early 2000, that would have actually grown. Okay, and then it grows till 2000, and then we all know that from 2000 to 2009, 2001 to 2009, the economy, the stock market dipped. Obviously, we had the bank issue in 2007. We had the dot-com bust in there. But in 2012, you would still have more funds in that account than you had when you started. Now, that's not to say, hey, everybody's going to be in this position. And the reality of it is, for me, if I was 25 years in retirement and my funds were growing that fast, maybe I would start taking out a little bit more. And that's where you put yourself in the best position to say, hey, okay, I want to take the grandkids on a vacation, or I'm okay, 20 years in retirement, taking a little bit more out because my time horizon is shorter, and I want to enjoy a little bit more of those assets. But you've put yourself in a position with a 4% distribution strategy. And by the way, this is on a mix of 50% stocks, 40% bonds, and 10% short term. Okay, so that's the allocation in this model right here. But as you can see, the outcome is dramatically different by moving from a 6% to a 5% and a 4% strategy here. So that was the kind of the first portion of the presentation, where we really talked about, hey, what are the risks that we need to look at as we move into retirement, and what are some soft things that we could talk about that we need to start strategizing for that put us in the best position? How do we combat inflation? How do we combat excess withdrawal strategies? What thoughts do we need to put into healthcare, right? When am I going to retire? The second phase of understanding, hey, here are the risks that we want to move away from and lower or lessen. We want to move into that risk off position, as we like to say. But how do we do that? And we do that by starting with a plan. And you might hear us say a lot, financial planning is a process, and it's a balancing act, right? And for me, that process is a 1-year planning process. You make a long-term plan, and every year you adjust it for where the portfolio is at, for where the family's at, where the couple's at. As their goals in life continue to change, we just adapt and we move forward. So there are, some key components to making this income plan and making it detailed and working with someone who can help you define that. Here is what I want my retirement to look like. This is the picture of what I want to look like. Here's what I have in assets, and I'm moving towards that retirement. How do we merge those together to achieve what we want to achieve? Let's talk about strategies and the plan that you could put in place to start doing that tonight. Okay, it's really 4 steps. You want to really identify your inventory, do an inventory of your expenses versus your income, right? We want to first make sure we cover our essential expenses. Then if we can, we want to fund those discretionary expenses. And as we move through that all throughout life, those both change, right? And they change in retirement as well. And then, as I talked about, that series of 1-year plans, we want to review regularly. I use this cruise ship analogy, right? If a cruise ship is traveling a long course, in order to change directions, they really only need to move a few degrees in each direction. And then over time, it puts them back on course, right? We're sailing a cruise ship. We want to make small changes throughout the process to get us to where we want to be, and we want to review that regularly. So the first step, as I mentioned, is really an inventory of our expenses. And there's 2 forms of expenses. You have your essential expenses, right? Those must-haves: shelter, home, food, water, energy, electricity, clothing. Those things you need and that you will have before retirement and into retirement. Okay, some of those expenses may increase as you move into retirement. Some of those expenses may decrease as you move into retirement. So it's key to know those. One of the examples might be, hey, we've got a home mortgage. Can we pay that off before retirement? Is it on track to pay off before retirement? Or are we going to carry that into retirement and still continue paying on the home mortgage? Okay. And then we're looking at those in your personal side. Where does long-term care fall at? Is that an essential expense, or is it discretionary? Do we need to plan for, or are we comfortable with where our path is at and what we want for our long-term care needs as we move forward? But now we've identified, hey, here are our expenses, essential, discretionary. What does our income look like? And we kind of have that broken up into a couple categories too. Solid income sources. If you have a pension, great, that's awesome. Solid income source, hopefully guaranteed for as long as you live, it should be. What does a survivorship look like? How much of that's passing down? If your husband or wife survives and you pass away first, what do they get? We want to know that. You want to know that. Social Security, which we'll talk about here in more detail soon. What does that look like? When's the best time to take it? At this point in time, that's still a guaranteed income for most of the people on the call. So we want to know that. That's a guaranteed source. Do I have any annuities in place that perhaps have a income rider on it that's guaranteed as well? Okay. And then outside of that, we kind of come back to our own assets. Okay, where's funding coming from for my investments? Do I own retail property? Do I have rental property? Do I have real estate that's going to pay me a passive income, right? That income in retirement. And then really something that's growing in popularity is, and this isn't meant to, make you freeze or panic for retirement, but many retirees today are working part-time. And most of the studies show the income portion of that is really a small amount. The other portion is wanting to have something they can go do that's important to them on a regular basis, that keeps them socializing, keeps them active, and makes them feel like they have a sense of purpose. So we talk about part-time employment. It really is a part of many people's strategies today because they just find that they're happier and healthier when they have something to go do on a consistent basis. I will admit, for most of my adult life, the idea of working in retirement wasn't there. But many years ago, when I transferred into this industry, it became one of those thoughts is, I could do advising and help people throughout my entire adult life and into retirement. It just maybe doesn't have to be on a 50-hour a week, 40-hour a week time frame. It could be a little bit less with very important clients that I can continue to support as they move into retirement or while they're into retirement. So that's a key component in retirement planning now is, do I want to work part-time? Do I need it? Or am I good? My dream in the future was I'm going to move somewhere where I can walk on a beach every day. I still like to do that, at least during winter months. Right now would be nice. So we've got that all broken out, right? And we want to earmark where our income is going and what it's paying for, okay? Identify that. We've got our income. We're going to identify those essential expenses, and we're going to pay for our essential expenses first with our identified solid income. So the guaranteed stuff, Social Security, pension, annuities, anything that's going to provide you a stable income that gives you a regular withdrawal, that's going to pay for those essential expenses. And then we look at that essential expenses and we say, is there a gap? Okay. Is my income not my guaranteed, my stable income, not high enough to cover my essential expenses? Okay. Is there something else I could put in place that will cover that? What is my systematic withdrawal plan to generate the extra income? And through there, as I mentioned, probably too many times tonight, how is healthcare cost fitting into all this? Okay. And the key component with that is really, 30% of your income might just be from Social Security. And if anybody is near drawing Social Security, you know that it's a difficult game to say, when is the best time for me to start drawing dollars out of my Social Security account? And the key component now, in that we're all living longer, is the reality is, if we delay our Social Security, that benefit that we receive increases around 8% every single year. And this graph really, this bar graph or chart, really demonstrates that right now. Okay. And I'm going to go through it so it makes sense. But if you retire at the age of, let's say, 62, and you start drawing Social Security right away, your annual benefit would be, let's say, for example, if your annual benefit were $17,724 right now at age 62. But if you delayed it until your full retirement age, depending on when you're born, around 67, that benefit has grown from 17,000 per year to 26,000 per year. And if you delayed it further until 70, which it stops growing at 70. So no matter what, in today's scenario, even if you're going to continue working, if you haven't drawn Social Security when you reach 70, you'll start drawing it. There's no reason not to. You could work as much as you want at that age, and that benefit's not going to grow anymore. So you would start drawing it at 70. But that benefit, which was 17,000, nearly 18,000, if you took it at 62, grows to 34,000 at the age of 70. You say, wow, that's a big difference, but how long do I have to live for that to be worth it? And this is kind of what this chart shows right here. If at 62 you lived to be 70, you would have received $141,000, a little bit over 141, close to 142. If you started taking it at the age of 67, that 26,800 annually you would have taken 80,000 by the time that you were age 70. So you look at that and go, okay, if I live a shorter life, then taking it early would have been the beneficial move because I took more. But we don't know when our expiration date is. And over here at the age of 70, you see, that's when we first start drawing it. So there's no funds that we built up there. Now, if I took it at 62 and I lived to be the age of 80, so 18 years down the road, you would have withdrawn $319,000 in Social Security. But here's really where it switches over. If you had waited until 67 to draw Social Security, by the time you hit 80, you would have taken out $349,000. So that's the big increase, $30,000 increase over taking it at 62. So 80 in this scenario, and this is a scenario, right? Each of you would have different numbers. 80 is the age at which you say, had I waited, I would have taken out more. And I'll go back and say, if you had the ability to wait. Not all of us, not everyone certainly is in a position to wait until 67 and take Social Security. Completely understandable. And then if you, in that same scenario at age 80, and you started taking out 70 years old, then your amount taken out would have been $340,000. Now the last line here shows what we really should be planning for, and that's planning for you to live to be 90. Okay, one of you to live to be at least 90 if you're a married couple, statistically. So if you live to be 90, and you started drawing at 62, that's $17,000 a year, you would have taken out just under $500,000, $496,272. If you waited until 67 to withdraw, you would have withdrawn 617,688, so nearly 618. Big difference right here. Big difference, and the big difference per year is about $9,000. So that's a big difference each year. And then had you waited till 70, that number just continues to grow. You would have drawn out shorter time periods, 70 to 90. So in a 20-year period, you would have withdrawn $681,000. So really, considering this is going to make up a third or maybe a little more of your retirement income, it's a key component to making the right decision. If you have the luxury of delaying Social Security income, it may be worth it. It may not. Once again, individual decision that we'd be glad to discuss with you is looking at retirement, the impact that delaying or taking it has on your overall retirement strategy. And then, so we've identified, hey, we need to pay for our mandatory expenses, our essential expenses up front. And the next thing that we want to fund is our discretionary expenses. And that's where we talk about really taking the withdrawal from your assets, okay? Withdraw from our 401ks, withdraw from our IRAs, our Roth IRAs, any asset that you build up, we want to take that and the excess withdrawals from that, still staying underneath that, around that 4% strategy, that really pays for the discretionary expenses. And that's going to mean a lot of different things to each of you on the presentation tonight. It could mean that vacation every year. It could be snowbirding in Florida or Texas or a warm weather client. It could be that cruise around the world. Most likely canceled right now, but hopefully back on track soon. Whatever that dream or that goal that you want to achieve in retirement, it's going to come from our remaining assets after we've covered our essential assets. And really, there are different ways to consider, hey, what is that final income strategy? Is it an interest only draw off of our fixed investments? Is it an investment where it returns a lot of dividends on a regular basis that's consistent? That can fund the extra stuff that we want. Is there a bridge? Is there an immediate income and an investment balance that replenishes that immediate income on a regular basis? That's where we really talk about that bucket strategy, short-term, medium range, long-term strategies, and the buckets keep refilling each other. And then, that withdrawal rate, is it balanced? Is it a well-balanced portfolio? Does it feed the buckets? Does it put in place an interest strategy? Nothing says that one strategy is the right way. Really, it's a combination of strategies. It's a process. And as I said earlier, it really is a balancing act. And within that, hey, what is going to be the right asset mix between bonds, short terms, equities that are going to get us to our goals? And really, the four things that we have to take into consideration when we're talking about this piece of pie right here is time horizon. Once again, we're planning for 30 years for retirement, which is exciting that we get to retire, hopefully, and live that long and have a great second half of our life, essentially. What are the risk tolerance levels that we're able to accept and can withstand? And I think personally, this is where working with a financial advisor, us at John Graham and Associates, or someone else you might work with, they should help you tolerate that risk, right? It's on them to help you with that. Understand where can we tolerate it at? Understand, for me, a big part of helping people is not falling into behavioral finance of reacting to situations. Let's not react to a short-term dip in the stock market. We're investing for the long term, and here's how we're doing. Yes, even in retirement, we can invest for the long term. Understanding your investment experience levels, okay? Where have I been? What have I done? How comfortable am I with it? And then making sure you have that complete financial picture, okay? You understand your financial situation. The advisor on your team understands your financial situations, right? They could be the quarterback. We should be the quarterback of that team, helping you build this and pull it all together for you, or someone else that you're currently working with. Can't stress that enough. Working with somebody that can help steer the ship on the course that you're on. And then coming back to meeting with your advisors, getting support on a regular basis, even in retirement. Remember, it's a cruise ship. We have to make small adjustments throughout the process to get us to where we want to go. It's a balancing act. We want to make sure that we're balancing it and constantly making adjustments. It's a process and it's a balancing act. So you want to review your retirement income goals leading up to it, but you also want to review your retirement goals, your retirement income every year in retirement. Okay. Each year, you're going to reassess your expenses. What expenses are going up in retirement? What expenses are going down? It's also certainly critical. It's equally important to rebalance your portfolio in retirement as it is leading up to retirement. Most plans that we work with rebalance at least annually, right? That process should stay in place as you move into retirement. Okay. And then the one small takeaway in making sure that you're one small takeaway, but add on in that if you're looking at your plan on an annual basis and you're refreshing it, you're rebalancing it, you're making sure it's on the right course, you also want to make sure your beneficiary designations are where they want to be. Nothing is more important than making sure that the things that you built up, the assets that you built up, the legacy that you built passes on in the manner that which you want it. Do I have a will in place? Is there a trust in place? How do I want these funds distributed? Because that's your legacy. And as important it is to have a great life and to meet your goals and achieve those and have the retirement that you're planning for, it's also important to make sure that when the time comes, they pass on the way that you want it to. So part of that is beneficiary designations, your will, your trust. Do they pass on the funds in the manner in which I want them to the loved ones, to charities that I want them to go to? Maybe it's your church, your alma mater. It's got to be the way that you want it. So that will wrap up tonight's presentation. I just go back to those two components, right? Understanding your risks and then planning for those. And when you combine the two and you know them and you put in strategies that will help you combat them and lower them, okay, and move you from a risk on to a risk off position, you can absolutely have the retirement that you want within your means and do the things that you want to do as you move into retirement. I'm going to go ahead and open it up. If you have a question, please type it in the chat box on Zoom. If you are currently a client of ours, which many of you are, if you have questions, follow up with myself or the financial advisor that you work with at John Graham and Associates.